they went beyond the Call of Duty to do what they signed up to do. Like they would check on you outside of school. You could meet with them on a Saturday, and they give you that motivation. And the relationships, the last part, the relationships that were built are long term. You know, I kept in contact with so many teachers from middle school and high school. I got blessed to go to a HBCU because of those teachers. You know, Miss Dr. Kirkland, I still speak to him to this day. You know, I still speak to, Mr. Daughtry, Mrs. Daughtry. I speak to these teachers that I knew since I was 12 and 13 years old. And I still ask them for advice. I still ask them for career advice. I still ask to reach out to them for guidance. So that relationship, that community, that authenticity went beyond the classroom. And it pushed me to understand. I didn't know what HBCU was, but I sure did go there because they pushed you outside of that. And then they even came to my graduation from college. So, and then they say, okay, you're not done yet. Go get your master's. I'm like, and they keep pushing and keep pushing. So that level of excellence, that standard of excellence didn't stop once you left their classroom. They followed you and made sure that you became great. So to sit here on this panel with so many educators that I respect, it's like seeing Dr. Rock. I'm like, hey man, you remember me? It's a great feeling because we can say that we pay homage to you guys for giving us the platform to go forward, to get this education, and that we can take the same knowledge that you gave us and give it on to the next generations. So the social emotional part played a big part in not only our career, but to go beyond us and to the next generations that follow.
Thank you for sharing that, Quincy. And next, Bianca. Bianca, you ready to share out? Oh, yeah. Oh, so we're gonna go to Joseph. Joseph, you want to share your experience?
Yes. I honestly don't know where to start. But I think I just want to start by telling those teachers that are out here that had me as a kid, thank you. I think the love that those teachers showed me without even knowing me pushed me to be the best person that I am. I remember so many things about 113 in Banneker that I still brag to this day about that with my kids. And I'm on, I'm a little over 30 and I'm like, yo, I loved my middle school. And like, I still talk about it with my friends, like my middle school experience and my teachers. I remember most vividly from middle school, the college tour, Mr. Kirkland, Mr. Adams, Mr. Daughtry, Mr. Gaspy, there was one more. His first name was Mario. I forgot. He had locks at the time.
Mr. Aristide.
There you go, Mr. Aristide. But I remember those men because when we went on the college tour, my mom did her best to get me on that college tour because I was like, I'm not going to college. What is this? But I went on the college tour and I remember that it was such an experience for me that I know I needed it. I got to bond with men and I didn't know nothing about being a man at the time. But like I was telling us earlier in the week, like on that college experience, they broke me down and built me back up. I literally remember, and I talked about this with Dr. Kirkland and Mr. Gaspy and Mr. Adams recently. Like, I remember standing in front of the whole group and like they were reading off our grades and I did terrible. And I was like, yo, are they serious? But I think once they finished breaking me down and chiseling all of that stuff away, they asked the guys that was with us, they said, so what can we give him as advice? What advice can we give you? And I thought that was like a really powerful moment that still sticks with me because it's like, you put it out there in front to let everybody know that I'm not doing well, but you also asked, how can I help you? What do you need help with? This is what you need help with. And it stuck with me forever. And I think my experience at Benjamin Banneker was just as powerful because I've had so many teachers that I would meet there that went to HBCUs. And it was like, you didn't know it until you start to talk to them and they give you that experience. And they say, I went here, like North Carolina Central University or Howard or Morgan State. And I'm like, I want to experience these things. And they come back and they have such pride for these things and they give it to you. They tell you these stories like Miss Cook Person, she would tell us these stories about her life. And I think for me, that's part of the culturally responsive education. That's the part we need. We need to hear that my teacher has experienced like defeat before, because you don't know this. You think that because we're adults that we've never experienced it. But listening to Miss Cook in her ELA classes, I used to be like, wow, like she really was defeated at some point. Like her life story, I was like, oh, I feel it, you know. And then like years later, myself, at one point I didn't think I was gonna go to college, but I think going to Banneker and going to 113 introduced me to the idea of college through Mr. Gatsby. And then when I got to Banneker, I went on a college tour again, and it was like, yo, I did this. Forget the feeling that I got once I got into like Morehouse. I was like, yo, I'm out. It was like such an amazing feeling to be able to go, you know. And then I almost had that dream dash, but luckily Quincy, who's on the panel with us, was my roommate. You know, I've known Quincy since middle school, high school, and college, and now we work together. Actually, he teaches 8th grade, I teach 5th, so it like went full circle, you know. And I always think back to those experiences and what my teachers have done, because I always think about how they would teach something, you know, and what they did to become better. And I'm like, you know, I always wanted to be an educator. I always like in my brain, I was like, I always wanted to be a teacher because of them. And it still is like that, you know. And now every chance that I've gotten, I've always was like, I need to get better. So I went to Morehouse and finished. I have a bachelor's from Morehouse. I got 2 masters after I finished Morehouse. And I'm like, at one point I was thinking about a PhD, but I was like, I need to slow down a little bit. But I think it was that love, and that was like just seeing people that look, sound like me, to talk like me, music is me. I can remember a teacher in high school, Mr. Turner. I swear I remember the day he came in. He was like, "You guys heard the new Jay-Z album at the time?" And he was like breaking down the lyrics, and I was like, "This is what it's like to be a culturally responsive teacher with your kids, breaking down lyrics from a rap album that we all listened to and we didn't know nothing about it." And I still remember the song. It was 30 something. So it's like those things that I still remember. And I'll make this last point when it comes to like, you know, culturally responsive is not just curriculum, it's relating it to the life of your students. The last thing that I remember from like a curriculum side though was Miss Pender from 113. She taught us, and I know Miss Corbett brought it up, the life, you know, the Malcolm X. And to this day, I still remember how she taught that lesson, which she taught it in 4 parts, and how Malcolm X changed over 4 different times in his life. And I'm telling you now, I was 13 or 14 at the time, and I'm well over 30, and I'm like, I still remember how it was taught. So that says a lot about how impactful my teachers have been, you know, and just the administration and how things shape my life. So I'm forever in debt in 113 in Banneker. Like I still brag to this day, and people be like, "Well, what school did you go to?" And I say, "I went to Banneker. I went to 113." I'm like, it's a shocker when I tell people that, you know, I've never experienced education like them. Like for me, all of my teachers were Afrocentric. They taught us based on what they thought. You know, they wore locks. You know, they wore jewelry, and it was like, this is normal. This is normal for me. I don't know nothing about, you know, what other students had experienced. So this was my journey, and I loved it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Lucky you, Joseph. And Bianca, we're gonna go to Bianca next, and then Sharian.
Hello again. So as I'm listening to you guys, I didn't know what an HBCU was either, not even in 113. And I didn't attend one, and I still kick myself to this day for not attending one. But I have like a hoodie from every HBCU because it was very important for me to represent that, especially like, you know, in South Bronx and Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. I wanted kids to point and say, oh, I know someone who goes there. I want to go there or whatever, just, you know, foster that conversation. But for me, culturally responsive education benefited me because it allowed me to feel safe and connect with educators that looked just like me. Prior to 113, I went to, I forget what it was called. I'm so old. It was somewhere downtown. And I remember my first day of school, one of the girls said, I don't want to sit next to Bianca because she's white. And we had a white educator who just said, just sit down. And surprisingly, her name was Miss Harrison too. And I never forgot that. And so after that, that was like 4th grade. So I went to 113 in the 7th grade, and I felt empowered instantly. Miss Uraka, someone who looked just like me. I didn't know what her ethnicity was, but I felt safe. I felt comfortable. She never like made it a point to make sure, like, you know, to say, oh, your hair's so curly, or those things that a lot of educators mention that are just not important. It was a warm and demanding space. Like I said last week, she would black on me and then get me together. A lot of the content was very relevant. I, for one, struggled with math. I hated it, hence why I'm an ELA teacher. And Miss Uraka made the content very relatable, bite-sized even. She scaffolded, even if there was a fight inside the classroom, we were gonna learn and we were gonna pass. And that was that on that. Miss Pinder, Joseph talked about her. She had an essence like no other. If we were in recess and there were things going on in recess, none of that was coming in the classroom. She was very soft-spoken. She was very calm. It didn't matter what happened right before her class, but you were going to be on task in that class. While, she demanded calm and respect while teaching us all of this wonderful Black content. Even just the corporate special, like these are little things that after 113, I never saw again. I never saw people want to wear, African cloths, or there were no mud cloths hanging up like there was in 113, or, like my parents, thankfully, are very pro-Black, and I had that in me instilled. I haven't seen that since 113. And I think that's why it's so important for me to not to keep fighting in my own school. I teach in Harlem, and I've been there for 8 years, and it's in the middle of the projects, which was very intentional by the CEO. And you wouldn't believe all the pushback I get for wanting Juneteenth to be observed, or let's include myths and folklore from Senegal. And it's just like, no, let's use what the curriculum comes with. And I'm like, how does that, why would the students feel invested? There's no buy-in. So for me, it was very important. I never wanted to be an educator. I always wanted to be a writer. But it makes so much sense. It's very perfect. It's perfect for me. I love what I do, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you for sharing all those layers. That's so funny. The corporate special. That brings me to Sharian, who also brought it up last week. Sharian.
Yes.
Would you like to share?
Yeah. So for me, 113, what stood out to me the most was the self-identity, not just also always focus on the academic and the content, but also just the whole child, being dressed appropriately when you came to school, because if you wasn't, you would get a corporate special. This corporate would not hesitate to pull you to the side or in her office to, fix whatever situation you had going on. So just the well-roundedness. I was a dance major, and I don't know if it was something that the educators knew that they were doing, but just being natural and showing that they love themselves by wearing their hair natural and being conscious of what they ate. Mrs. Steer, just watching her at the age that she was back then, and her being so, body conscious of exercising every day. Just those little things made a huge impact on me. And at the time I took for granted, but thinking about it, I say, wow, how old was Mrs. Steer back then? She looked so good. She took care of herself. It blows my mind. And also, for me, coming from Bedford-Stuyvesant and coming to Fort Greene, it was a huge difference, in the areas, in the community, in the school itself. So it was a different world, and it really opened me up to have self-consciousness and self-identity and self-awareness. And those are the things that really inspired me to want to become an educator. It's important for me to give back what I was given. And just having educators that were young, that were vibrant, that were creative. They made learning fun, meaningful. They talked like we did. They knew what was going on. You couldn't get over on them, because they'll let you know that they knew what time it was. And I was Miss Shiraka, I would see you walking to the school in the morning, and I was like, wow, she lives around here. So just all of those things, just being transparent and just feeling like you guys are us and we are you guys. So that's my takeaway from, yes, exactly. It was a community, and I didn't get that again until I went to a HBCU. So I'm forever grateful for that experience at 113.
Thank you for sharing that, Ryan. Thank you for sharing that. And by the way, for those viewers watching, 2000 Fort Greene is not 2020 Fort Greene. So even though it was a little different than that side, it was still Fort Greene back then. So yeah, so it was still official. Zoe, you want to share your experience, and then we're going to move on to the administrators, because I want to hear so much about how this structure was intentionally created. What was the thought process that went into that? Was always going to wrap it up for the
So yeah, I
students.
think something we should definitely explore is like the connection between students graduating from RELC and Banneker and going on to HBCUs. I feel like that's the real connection I'm noticing, because I as well graduated from Alabama State University in 2015, and I can say that, you know, being at 113 really put into me, like, I learned about what it, like I said this in the beginning, I learned about what it is to be in a culturally responsive, you know, education space. And like, I didn't want to be anywhere else. I had came from a school in Park Slope before I got to 113, and it was a lot of, you know, trauma, classroom trauma. Like, you know, my mother will tell you to this day, like my second grade teacher, she pulled me out of the school because of her response to me as a young Black girl, and to the response to the other, you know, Black students, the very few Black students that were in the school. And so when I got to 113, you know, to share a similar story about Miss Uraka, like, you know, highly developmental stages, hairs changing, bodies changing. And Miss Uraka is the first person that was like, I feel like you're uncomfortable about what's going on. Let's talk about it. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, I'm developing as a woman, and Miss Uraka like called me out, like, you're uncomfortable with this. Let's talk about this. Cause I could tell in the way that you're moving, in the way that you're acting. I started off with locks and ended up like, you know, cutting my hair, and I had no idea what to do with my hair. And Miss Uraka we were outside on the during recess, and Miss Uraka was like trying to teach me how to braid my hair. And so, you know, these were moments that stuck with me, and I've taken them with me to every place that I've gone, because there's nothing you could do for your students unless you see them, unless you recognize who they are as individuals and not as a collective. Yeah, we're all young children of color, but all of us were individuals, and there were people in that building that saw each of us as individuals and treated us as such. You know, I don't know if any of the teachers here or Miss Corbett, anybody remember that? Like, you know, I had a lot of energy. I was everywhere. I had a lot to say. I wanted to be everywhere, and I can still remember Dr. Kirkland screaming my name down the hallway, telling me to get to class, and I'm running to class because I didn't want to be in the office. And I remember just always having just like so much energy, so much to give, and just knowing that, first of all, community was at the center, because anybody in the school building will call my mother, not just my teachers. People in the office, teachers, security, anybody would call my mother. And I just remember, like, you know, that being such a straightening kind of thing for me. Like, it felt like I was, yes, Gina was the first to call my mother. So, you know, I just knew that I was in a place that had expectations of me. It was very important to me to live up to those expectations. And even when I failed, it wasn't kicking me to the curb. It was okay, so what's going wrong? Let's talk about it. Let's figure this out. And so that has encouraged me to continue to seek out institutions like that for myself, not only in my education, but also as an educator. I don't want to be in a world where children that don't look like me, that can't benefit from the same things that I benefited from. You know, I don't want to be in those environments. Yeah, the other places got more money, they got more of everything, right? But, you know, that's another thing. We have to keep pouring into these education spaces. Like, yeah, we're lacking. We might have some holes in the ceiling. We might have some whatever it is over here. But you know what? We're going to demand what these students deserve. And so I feel like I learned that very young and very early on. And so those experiences have never left me. I remember, and last thing I'm going to share, I remember I was teaching English in New Jersey, in Newark, New Jersey, South Side, Southwood. It was very New Jersey, right? And so, so I remember like feeling so frustrated with what was happening in my school, like being so attached to my students, but having this like conundrum about, should I leave? Should I do this? Should I do that? And that's how I actually ended up in Baltimore. And the funny thing is when I was applying for just random places in Baltimore, I was talking to Majida about wanting to leave New York and searching for places. She's like, do you know that Dr. Kirkland used to work at the school that you just applied for? And I sent Dr. Kirkland my resume on Facebook. And literally the next week I had a resume, and I was at that school for three and a half years. And so that's what I mean by community and connection. Like, I'm a grown up, I'm an adult with a degree, and my teachers and my administrators from middle school still have my back and still care about what's going on in my life, and still talk about, you know, and that was by chance, completely by chance. I didn't seek out Dr. Kirkland. I just happened to go apply for the school that he was at. And so, you know, that's really how the universe works. And so that's why this work has to continue. It was poured onto us. It was poured into, you know, my peers and to other students. And that's why we have to keep going. It's such a moment. I'm just so glad to be here and to see all these faces. I love y'all. I'm gonna be quiet now. Go ahead, Miss Uraka.
Thank you for sharing that, Zoe. Really, the high expectations and high demand definitely consistent across the board. I will say, you know, a lot of teachers talk about high expectations, but it's high demand that comes with that, and that's exhausting, right? Not only am I going to expect the best from you, but I'm going to stick by you until you get there. As annoying as that will be, and as a teacher, I can tell you that doesn't always feel good because the student isn't always like, oh yeah, sure, I want you annoying me until I get to that level. But we have to be relentless, right? Because you need that second chance, that redemption. And we know that young people are full of possibilities and endless potential. So now let's talk about the behind the scenes. I want to go to Ms. Corbett first, just because she's in the middle school, and then we want to go to the high school. What were some of those intentional decisions, Ms. Corbett, Dr. Corbett, that went into creating these spaces of culturally responsiveness? We're talking about from the hiring, the student population, all of that.
Well, one of the things that that as I was listening to these young great educators, I thought about the fact that when I was asked to go to 113, I found out, first of all, I was from Bed-Stuy too, so I already knew the community, and I had already been in the district for a number of years, so I knew a lot of their parents, you know. And I was one of those teachers that would go to your house. I mean, I'd go up in the elevators in the projects. I mean, you know, that's what we did. You know, that was the heartbeat of District 13. But one thing I understood that a school was more than an organization. It was an organism. It had to keep changing and growing and stretching according to the needs of those of the children. And 113, although I always thought it was the mothership of the district, it was the only safe block with that was surrounded by multiple gangs. You had the Atlantic terminals, and you had those out of Fort Greene, and you had the other ones on the other side of down there, Franklin Avenue and whatnot. But anyway, so we had to have that safe place. So one of the things that we did was to grow and develop a relationship with all the kids, because we wanted them to see safe. So yes, we would be out on the sidewalk at 3 o'clock. We'd be out on the sidewalk in the morning. We'd go into the bodegas and get them out of there to get to school on time, because we cared about you. And I think that you know, as they talk about that a principal or AP, they're supposed to be active and present, not just in the office, active and present and around and engaging in the school. I think that's what everybody kind of took on. And as I listen to you talk about staying involved with your teachers, I'm a little late. I just finished meeting with one of my students from my first class 48 years ago. I've stayed in contact with him. That's just part of what you do if you're passionate about what you're doing. And so, you know, I'm glad that I intentionally looked for that when I hired. When I came into 113, there wasn't that many teachers of color, and certainly not that many Black men. And so I intentionally went after those that were passionate about children. First of all, the ones that liked them. You know, you have people that don't even like kids, but the ones that liked them, that were willing to help stretch them, and then was willing to share their gifts, their talent, and their time with them. And so I began to hire more men. I thought it was ridiculous that here we are in the middle school and there wasn't that many men in the school, and certainly not that many Black men. And so, yes, I met Dr. Kirkland when he was still in Morehouse, and I was told he was good in math. I talked him into going into education. said, okay, let me get your fingerprints now. So when you graduate, you have to come back here. So that's how we got him. I mean, I reached out to Mr. Daughtry. Mr. Daughtry had come to an open house and I for his nephew, and I talked him into coming into the school. Stop getting the kids in the courtroom because he was an attorney. Stop getting in the courtroom, bring them into the school. So many of them, Mr. Adams, another one, he was an attorney. He was in a whole nother field. You have to go out for what you want and bring them in. And then give not only the teachers a voice, you got to hear what your students need and what's interesting to them and what they want. And I remember we had, everything. I thank God that we did have teachers that were passionate about who we were as a people, culturally as a people. And so as a principal, I had a chance to support their ideas. I had the opportunity to support their desires. But Dr. Young also introduced James Comer to the district. And James Comer, as a child psychologist out of Yale, his whole program was about making sure you're hitting the whole child, making sure you're not just dealing with them cognitively, but you're dealing with them physically. You're dealing with that whole child. And so, yes, I began to push to make sure that every area of a child was needed. Even as when I left, we used to have the gender meetings. All the boys, all the men went together with the boys, all the girls went together. We had a young women's empowerment conference where we talked about etiquette. That's when we introduced the college tours and whatnot. You have to look beyond whatever meets somebody else. This is not a cookie cutter experience. You got to look at what meets the needs of the students sitting in front of you. And if you don't have it, then you make it. You have the power to create it. We didn't have a girls basketball team, but when Mr. Mooney was willing to do one, we had a girls basketball team. My understanding is that's when Epiphany Prince came on to the basketball team. And right now, she's playing professional ball in Russia. I mean, you never know what and how your gifts, your talents will be used. So you intentionally have to know what you're going for. You have to give them a voice and you have to let them see how their gifts and what they're learning, how it connects to the real world. I don't know if you were in the school when the and if you were in the school when the guys on the corner you disrespected the students, some of the students were disrespected by a bodega owner, and they came in and said, Miss Corbett, that's not fair. It's not fair. They're throwing the money at us. They don't respect us. I said, what did you learn in social studies about how we handle disrespect? And so they began to talk about protests, and they began to talk about, you know, boycotting. I said, so then let's boycott. And we boycotted the store on the corner. And when the store owner came in and wanted to talk to me, I said, no, you don't talk to me. You talk to the student government. You talk to the class president. We asked Mr. Adams to serve as their counselor, their lead counselor. They sat down and they wrote their list of demands for them to agree to before they went back into that store. That's how you teach personal pride. You have to know your quarter means something, your dollar means something. And so, those are just things that were just really important. I was going to a store recently, and as I was going in a restaurant, and one of the students hollered out, "Oh, Miss Corbett, I remember when we learned etiquette at the women's the empowerment conference. You don't know how great you are, and how much you have to give these kids, and they're waiting to be like sponges, just soaking it all up. But they need to feel that they're safe, they're wanted, they're needed to be seen in school, they're respected, and that everybody has a chance to grow and develop. Remember, celebrating success during Christmas time? Everybody got a
Yes.
chance to earn a gift, no matter what it was. Everybody got a chance, and that was important. And we did those things intentionally. You know, it's not about just high expectations. You got to create the opportunities for the students to demonstrate those high expectations. So it's not just about the rigor, it's about those all those other opportunities that you provide.
Yes, yes. And of course, great leaders create other great leaders, right? So that's a testimony to you, a testament to you, as well as Dr. Rock, who we got up next. Thank you, Dr. Corbett. We're going to circle back, and I have some questions. But Dr. Rock, I want to hear about the behind the scenes on making Banneker the culturally responsive space that it is and that it was.
Okay, and Ms. Corbett, it's funny, some of the things that you spoke about. I remember the boycott and how impressed we were that a group of kids almost shut down a store because they were being disrespected. You know, that was something else. And I also remember when I first started teaching, I used to go into the kids' houses too. I know nobody would ever do that nowadays, but that's how we were. We would walk into a child's house and knock on the door at 8 o'clock at night and say, look, I got to talk to you, Mom. And the funny thing is I never got a bad response. I don't know about how you were. The parents were always welcome to hear from us. So I remember that. But going back to what the things that I did, my main focus was always on staff, who was in the building. And I always felt that that was my job, to make sure that every class that young person in our school went to, there was somebody there that knew how to relate to them, that could keep them engaged, that knew the topic, that were not afraid of them. That was my big thing. And that was what I talk to principals nowadays. That's what I always talk about. Who was in front of who are you putting in front of those children? And sometimes I'll go to a school and the principal will say, well, look at this bad teacher I have here. Or look at this bad teacher. And I tell them, look, you are the one that's allowing that to happen. You know, that's where my energy was always, who am I going to put in front of those kids? And I wanted somebody who had a lot of pride in themselves, who understand the pedagogical part, but who loved the children, who had a respect for them, who knew how to talk to them. And sometimes I would interview 40, 50 people for one job. I was constantly looking for people to bring into the school because I wanted to make sure that everybody had an opportunity, whether it was in English, Spanish, history, or whatever, to have a person in front of them that had a lot of pride and dignity. There used to be a running joke that you couldn't work at Banneker unless you had locks. Now that wasn't really true, but it did say something about the person. It said something about who was there, that they felt good about themselves. And when they got in front of the classroom, the kids would feel that way also. I remember we had a nurse one time they sent to the school, and the nurse went back to her where she worked, and she said, I can't work at that school. That school is too Afrocentric. And that made me feel so good that she was able to recognize that this is who we are. And this is how we're going to be. And anybody that comes in this building understand that we are proud of who we are. We're proud of our history. And we're going to make sure that our young people understand that. And we were kind of old fashioned in the sense that we were kind of strict and we didn't put any playing around. You guys know who I was. Some of y'all gave me a little bit of problems too, but we made sure that it was done out of love. That discipline or whatever we had to do was done out of love and respect. So most of my energy, when you talk about culturally responsive education, it begins with the teachers and who you bring into the school. And I would say maybe 2 years after I got to Banneker, 50% to 60% of the staff was gone. It was funny, at Banneker, 25% of the staff when I got there was excellent. Some of the best instructors, but there was a big 50 to 60% that I just felt, no, they don't need to be here. And I was not going to allow that. And the students knew that, and they kind of respected that. But that's where I put most of my energy in. And like I was saying last week, I had relationships with people, with the colleges in the area. I would go to the schools. I would speak to the students who were graduating, those people who would become teachers, and I would talk to them. the fellows program, when they first came out, I knew the people that were running it. They would send me people that they thought we would like at the school. So I was constantly looking for people, the right kind of people to bring in the school. And that was what I thought was most important. And that's when I talk to principals now. The culture of a school is formed by the adults. All the schools, the kids are basically the same. Some kids are a little bit more challenging, but the adults are the ones that create that culture. It's how they respond to each other and how they respond to the kids, and everybody gets that message. And if you know, everybody here knows, if you have one or two bad teachers, one bad teacher in the high school teaches 125 kids, right? So if you have 2 or 3 of them, that could spoil the whole culture and climate of the school. So when you ask what did I do, that was mainly what I was focused on. I focused on getting the right people into the school and finding out what their character was before they came to the school. Professional development, it doesn't work on character, okay? So you don't think that you're gonna change somebody who doesn't care about the kids, who don't understand the kids, by giving them some kind of professional development. That's not gonna work. I mean, I could teach you how to write a lesson plan or plan a lesson, but I can't teach you how to care about children. So if you don't have that right character, my thing was, you're not coming into the school. And when you do come in, we'll teach you whatever you need to know. And we know how first or second year teachers, they're gonna have some weaknesses, they're gonna have some challenges, and we were tolerant of that. But you had to be, do what you needed to do and do the right thing. And I think Ms. Corbett was saying the same thing. That was our mindset. No, I'm not gonna let you sit in front of these children. You're not going to be there. No, it's not fair to them. And sometimes I would look in the classroom and you look at the beautiful faces of our children, and you're going to allow somebody in here that's going to disrespect them and talk down to them. No. And that was how we did it at Banneker. And eventually we got the kind of staff that we wanted. So that was my intention. And still, when I talk to schools, and everybody knows this about me, I talk about who was in the building, those people, because that's what's going to make the difference.
Yeah. So while I have you here, I'm gonna ask you a follow-up question. Well, number one, yeah, that's also what Asa Hilliard was talking about in terms of questioning: do we have the will to educate all children? Right? Because yes, I can also attest that as a consultant, I can teach you how to break down the math, scaffold, and do all that other stuff. But if you don't care about the kids enough, then you won't have the will to go that extra mile, and everything's going to seem, overwhelming and just too much. But I want you to talk about your recruiting practices, because you shared a story and a couple of really solid strategies at our last debrief before this. Do you remember about the sitting in the college classroom?
Yeah, well, what I would do is I got to know, like, all the local colleges, the people at LIU, Brooklyn College, City College. I don't know if you remember Mr. Lilly, Dr. Lilly at City College, Ms. Corbett, but he was in charge of education. So what I would do is I would go to those schools and I would talk to the classes. These are people who are getting ready to graduate, and I would talk to them about our school and to look to see if there was anybody in that group that could work out at our school. And I did this every year. I would spend at least maybe 10, 12 days just going to schools and talking to people. And what I would be able to do is I was able to find teachers, and they would recommend some people as well, but I had that relationship with them. And most of the professors, they welcome, an administrator from a high school, whatever, coming into their classrooms. But I would actually, go to the classrooms, and afterwards I would have like little mini interviews. And if I saw somebody that had the right mindset or whatever, I would invite them to the school, and I would do that whether I had openings or not. I was constantly looking for people to bring into the building. And sometimes it was funny. Sometimes it could be 2 years later that I might need a math teacher, and I would have this person's resume who I knew was going to be strong, and I would get back to them. So it was constant. And I can remember going to City College a lot and just sitting in the classroom, getting to know them. And I got a lot of good teachers that way. But recruitment, sometimes I remember when me and Mickens would, and those of you don't know, Dr. Mickens used to be the principal at Boys and Girls. We would be standing in front of the Board of Education, where the people were coming, where the new teachers were coming to the system, when they were going to the, when they were going to sign up at the Board of Ed, whether they were from another state. And we would actually literally be outside and catching those people as they were coming into the building and talking to them and trying to see if they could work at our schools before they even got, you know, into the system. And but the idea was we knew that that's what was going to make the difference in our school, who was there. So we did all these kind of crazy things. And
Can I share this strategy as well? If you had a teacher on the bubble, you know, this person, you saw the potential, but they were just, the fire wasn't there. Well, I would let them know that I had somebody coming in to do a demonstration lesson. And and they said, well, oh, do we have a vacancy? I said, I think we're about to have one in this room. So they're coming in to do a demonstration lesson. I can tell them that after they saw that other person and they saw I had somebody on the conga line ready to come in, they cranked right up and I got the quality that was already in there, but they thought they were going to retire on the job. So yeah, have some people come in and do some demo lessons.
That's a good one.
And for the ones that are on the bubble, I bet you it'll push them over.
Dr. Corbett, I hope this is legal and that we're not going to get anybody in trouble sharing some of these strategies. It is. Well, the other thing I wanted you to elaborate on was you said that you gave the students what they want, but I witnessed also that you gave them what they need and you anticipated that. So I want you to speak a little bit about that, but also about the courageous, you and Dr. Rock, in terms of courageous leadership to support courageous teachers, right? Because we could talk about teachers being courageous, but you guys made it easy because if it made sense and it was in the student's best interest, you supported it wholeheartedly. But just in terms of what does it take, the challenges, I know you guys got a lot of challenges then, and I know other administrators probably have that question and other teachers. How do I become a courageous leader and maintain this courage in a time where Georgia just banned, you know, critical race theory from being taught, or, you know, you kind of see the waves of what's happening. How can you do what's right for the kids but still maintain your integrity?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, my thing is you have to believe in it enough. You have to believe in it enough to not only say this is what you want to happen, but you provide whatever is needed to equip it to happen, as well as already be prepared to defend it. Make sure you already know what the benefits are, and and that you can sustain it, so that this is not just something that's a momentary experience for your student. It's sustainable because it connects to other experiences that you want them to have. So I'll fight for what's right. I'm not going to stand wrong and strong. You know, you fight for what's right, but you have to know what is going to be the benefit. How does it connect to what you're already doing? And is it sustainable so that it can keep moving forward? Just like you experienced it within yourself, it kept moving. So Africa Day every year. I don't know what happened, but every year it was something to look forward to. I never had to do a flyer for homecoming. When kids knew it was homecoming, they would all show up to share their same stories. You have to know what is in the best interest of these kids, and you need to stand very strong. And not look for somebody else to do it. You have to be on that front line, and you have to be willing to do it yourself.
Right. And then I also remember you talking about anticipating in our last meeting, anticipating what teachers might grieve about, right? So having that defense already set up.
Right. But that's what I was saying. You have to know the benefits. And you have to know, have to be ready to defend what you strongly believe in.
Yes. And for those who don't know, Africa Day was one day where every homeroom researched one country. We chose one country in Africa and had about a month to decorate our doors with images and information regarding that country in Africa. And then for African Day, people wore African attire. And it's a day of celebration of embracing diasporic roots. And yeah, it was wonderful. We also had food. People brought potlucks, brought dishes. It was amazing. So thank you for that experience. Rob?
Well, it was always a battle. I mean, when I first got to Banneker, Dr. Young was there, so he was very supportive of almost everything we did. Once he left, though, there was pushback. And, you know, some things I would do from directors, some things I just wouldn't do. And I would just tell them point blank, you know, we're not doing that. Because I think a couple of times, I don't remember, Ms. Corbett, they had new curriculum that they wanted to follow, and Carmen Farina was doing read alouds or whatever it was, you know, and I would just say, you know, we're just not doing that. You know, we got our thing going, just please leave us alone. And the reason why I could get away with that is because I had the community behind me. And this is the important thing that I'm telling these new leaders and these young people need to hear. When you become a leader, the first thing you need to do is go out and know who the people in the community are and make a relationship with them. It could be the parents, but even the people in, that live in the area, or the politicians, get to know them. Because the people downtown knew that if they ever really came hard on me, I could bring 300 people to you know, downtown City Hall, picketing and complaining. So most of the thing, I remember one time, I think I was telling this story that, because we used to always go to Africa every year. It was a trip that Miss Samuels used to put together, one of our teachers. And one year, and this is after Dr. Young left, because Dr. Young, of course, would always approve the trip. Well, so one year it was, and the kids, during, those who don't know, that during the year, the kids would fundraise, they would, everybody had to get their malaria shots. It was a whole big thing throughout the whole year. And a week before the trip, whoever was in charge said that this trip can't happen, that they're not gonna approve it. And I just had to say, oh yeah, okay, we are getting on that plane. And that's the one trip that I went on, because usually I didn't go because I needed my breaks during those Easter breaks. But this trip I went on, I said, we're going. And let the chips fall where they may. And you have to pick and choose your battles. But could you imagine if we had told those young people that they couldn't go on this trip after they had been planning, some kids for years, to raise the money? And it's just, you know, and that's courageous in a sense, but there's a line that, you know, you can't, you know, I'm not going to let them cross. No, you're not going to tell my children that they cannot go on this trip. We're going. And we just got on the plane and went. And, you know, I tell young people, you have to be courageous, but you have to be smart as well. I mean, if you're not tenured, don't do anything like that. Okay? Because they will give you pushback. But there comes a time when you have to stand up for your principles, what's right. And this is, you know, and they're gonna, look, that's how the Department of Education is, or all departments throughout the whole country. If they see Black people that are successful, they're gonna give you pushback. And I hate to say, especially Black men, if they see that you are successful, they're gonna come after you, okay? So there's some things that you have to say, you know, no, I'm not gonna do that. And that's, you know, what I had to do. Luckily, we had the leadership of Dr. Young initially, but I think he left halfway through my tenure, and we got people that did not look at us the same way. And they were actually looking for us to fail. I don't know about you, Ms. Corbett, but a lot of those people, you know, they don't like to be around people who are strong and people who are gonna stand up for what's right. So, but be courageous, but be smart at the same time. Don't be outrageous.
Right. Yeah. And then I think backing it up, like Corbett said, being able to stand by your convictions is important, you know, with solid facts. And like we said, culturally responsive education has been going on for years and years and years, and has been proven time and time again to be effective. Effective for all students, right? But also for our young Black and brown children that we need to get to excel. So I'm going to circle around to the former students who are now teachers. Well, two things. I don't think I highlighted enough that the former students who are on this panel are now all educators. I think in their introduction, we kind of drew that conclusion. And also, the Dr. Young that everyone is referring to is the Dr. Lester Young, who is the Chancellor of the New York State Board of Regents, just recently appointed during a historical appointment, right? Because I believe he's the first Black African-American male Board of Regents, Chancellor for the New York State Board of Regents. So he was the superintendent at the time. So just to give you a sense of the leadership and the layers of leadership and what that network looked like, I think it's important to mention. But so let's circle around to the teachers because we're winding down on time, and I want everyone to briefly give a practical strategy and a recommendation in alignment with culturally responsive education. What would you recommend to other educators? Because we heard from administrators, and if the administrators have other tips for administrators, we're going to circle back to you at the end. But let's just get one last round of practical tips that people can apply. So let's start with, who do we start with before? Cora?
Yes. So, I mean, the most practical of tips in terms of being culturally responsive is knowing who is in the room, knowing your students and knowing what they need so that you can meet them at that point. And so, you know, how do you do that? One thing I think is really important in September, right? When you come in, when you get your new set of students, take the first couple of lessons. And I mean, my students will know, not every lesson was a science standards based lesson, because I need to know, you know, who you are and to get to know you. So take some of those lessons just to do an intro. And it would, you know, seem science based. I would just ask simple questions. What was your last science class? Who was your last science teacher? What was your last science grade? What did you like? What did you not like? And they get that the first day, and I take it home and read it and actually know and get some form of understanding how my students related to my content. Because science, most students would just say, I know, I fail science, I don't do well at science, I'm not a science person. And so it was always, you know, it was my job, look, okay, you're not a science person, but you can learn, and I'm going to help you learn this science. And then some of them actually learned to love it and flipped over. So I would just say, key number one thing, know the students in the room and actually take the time to do that. And you can also take the time to do that when you know the content. And it, you know, seems a little funny, but when I interviewed with Mr. Leonard actually for science, and he gave me a living environment region. So I was like, take this and let's see what you get on that, right? And I guess that was like my test of content. But knowing that I know the content and knowing that I'll be able to get the students to pass the exam relieves some of the pressure, right? So I wasn't learning what I had to teach as I was teaching it, and that also just gave me time to learn the students. You're muted, Jessica.
Thank you. Next, we're going to go to Quincy. We're going to do the same order as we did earlier with the share out.
Mine's very similar because mine is very similar because it's something that I do on a regular basis. Conversation and circling back, taking the time to speak to them outside of the classroom, getting to know the students, what they like to do, what they do over the weekend. I purposely do a temperature check before every class just to gauge the room, gauge what the kids are going through. They all come from different walks of life, different home environments. You want to know what's going on there. And then you take those time, the time to kind of talk to them about random things. It could be, what's this game they play? Roblox. It could be the basketball game for the kids that like sports. It could be a show that's trending on Instagram or something like that, right? You show them like, hey, outside of the classroom, I'm a fun person too. So they could come to, they start coming to you with information. And then circling back, if there's something important that you see these students like, you circle back and ask them about it a week later. How was that thing that you talked about? And they'll come back and they'll start telling you other things. So just taking the time out to show that they are that important, that you're not only speaking to them in a whole class setting, but to have those one-on-ones. And sometimes it could just be you and 3 students just having a conversation at the lunch table. It could just you saying, good morning, how are you this morning? Let's say, seriously, how was your morning? You know, those times, because kids have a lot to say, but they don't normally have the platform to actually speak on their feelings. And a lot of kids don't know how to word what they're feeling in the first place, so they come in with attitudes. We take the attitude, and some teachers, they automatically ding them or try to redirect them. It's like, actually, there's something really happening. Take the time to actually speak to them. Circle back at the end of the day. I saw you were upset this morning. Let's talk about it. What was wrong? You know, don't take everything as a redirect or disrespect. Sometimes it takes the time to say, okay, you have a little, I'm gonna give you a minute after class. Hey, I just want to pull you aside, see what's going on. So taking the time, circling back, and just having casual conversations about life, about where they should go for middle school, where they should go for high school. Give them I do this all the time, the HBCU brainwash. Hey man, you should check out these schools. Like, this was a great experience for me. And let them, like, what is that? And I have students saying, hey, I want to go to the school. You should. And they start coming to you with questions. And that just gives you a different light, and you start to learn their personalities. You start to see yourself in them. You start to see, I know exactly how you're going to turn out, because you have this, and then you start to see certain strengths that they don't know that they have. And then you can start to push them along. And I feel like that transpires in what we talked about in the beginning, in the relationships that go on outside of the classroom, that go on after they graduate from those schools. And they'll come back to you with achievements. They'll come back to you with questions on what they should do next. You become their mentor. You become their big brother, their big sister. So taking that time out gives them that stability and that confidence to push forward.
Yes, and one point that you're going to make that also resonated with me, putting your ego aside. I was very young when I started teaching. So, you know, you're not that mature yet. And kids, especially middle school children, can really get under your skin, it forced me to put my ego aside and know that, like you said, when the students act out, it's usually from another place, and that you cannot take that personal. But yes, that's at the root of it. And then you look past it and you give them that love regardless, right? Thank you. Bianca, you want to share a tip?
Okay, so one of my best teacher friends and I started a group at my school called Young Kings, in which we took the at-risk boys that a lot of the newer teachers couldn't handle. And we had a lot of African-American male volunteers come into the school and speak to them. I used to work at Nike for several years, so we even took them to Soho, Mercer, and we walked all through Nike. We had a lot of entrepreneurs come in. We had a lot of the D9 members come in, and it really changed the game for, I guess, like suspensions and such. You know, classroom management is really difficult. And a lot of the times you're just thrown in. But it's different when you are maybe a white teacher from a suburban town in Connecticut or something, you know, rather than right here in Harlem or right here in Bed-Stuy. So we took the time to gather those boys. We increased their grades. We did one-on-ones. I FaceTimed them at nighttime sometimes just to make sure they did their homework. I'm always accessible. So I piggyback off of Quincy. Relationships are very important for me. A child's not going to want to learn or even just be vulnerable if you don't understand them, their family, where they come from, what they might eat. I've learned several different greetings in different languages because I am multicultural, and a lot of my students are as well. And so it's not fair that, like I said earlier, we're always talking about maybe like white myths and stuff, you know? So maybe their parents cook for me, maybe I cook for them, and we spend so much time together. And we're talking about starting a Young Queens group this year because the girls felt left out. But our boys were our priority because young Black boys, as we all know, you know, that's that pipeline, and we are just here to change the game. So.
Thank you for sharing that, Bianca. Next, let's go to Joseph.
I'm thinking about all the things that I do with my students now, and I always keep in mind that they're 10 and 11. For me, one of those techniques that I use is creating a classroom of error. For me, when I was a student, I was always given that opportunity to fail. I always think to myself, the best opportunities I've ever had came because I failed at first, or I did something that I wasn't supposed to. And then I was redirected, like in a way of reflecting. So I tell my students that the very first day is I let my students know, like, hey, it is okay if you don't do well. it is okay to fail. It is okay to fall and stumble. And I always tell them, like, that's the purpose that I stand in front of you, to let you know, like, I'm here to help you. And I let my students know, like, if you're failing or if you feel like you're not doing well, it's okay. What's not okay is to give up. And I always say that to my students throughout the year, that you're going to make mistakes. We're not perfect. You're not going to know everything right away. That's why you're here with us, because you only know a little bit. So this is why you're here in this grade. You know, you're going to learn more every day, but it's okay to make mistakes. Don't be afraid of those things. And I tell them all, you know, if you make a mistake or if you have the wrong answer, that's all right, because you're going to know it once we finish this lesson. You're going to know the right answer. And now you just apply it. So for me, it's always about allowing students to feel comfortable when they fail and just say, hey, I got you. Come on. We not done. You know, if you want, you can come to tutoring later and I'll make sure that you understand it. You know, this is why I do tutoring twice a week, you know, making sure we write our claims correctly and making sure that you understand that it's okay, you know, to make mistakes, because I've failed, I don't know how many times, but I bet I'm still here.
I was muted. Sorry. Thank you for that, Joseph. And that's a lifelong skill, right? Embracing mistakes and not remaining strong or wrong. That's something you don't want to take into adulthood. So thank you for sharing that. Who else we got left? We got Sharian and then Zoe. Share a tip.
So for me, I think really taking the time out to know the content that you're teaching as an educator, because if nobody could sniff out a teacher that does not know what they're talking about as a student, right? So knowing the content, taking the time to know the content, so that way you're comfortable as the teacher when you're standing in front of the students. You're confident, and they know that you're confident. They know that you know what you're talking about, and that makes them confident and wanting to learn. So for me, is knowing the content. And that's crucial to me, because you could be a cool teacher, you could be a fun teacher, but we got to remember the sole purpose of us being there is to educate. It's to get them to learn something. So don't get too caught up in all the other distractions. But for me, it's really knowing the content, and that way you can shape and mold it to your students, because you're the experts on your students, and you can shape the curriculum that best fits their needs. So if you don't know the content, then you really can't do anything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And as a math consultant, I can confirm that 100%. People bring me in for 2 days, so they're like, oh, my teacher just needs help with rigor. And I'm like, if they don't have the content, everything else is a done deal. And it goes back to who you have, the quality of instructors that we have in front of our children, right? Going back to what Dr. Rock and Dr. Corbett was saying. So yeah, and you know, as a teacher, going after that yourself, not just waiting for your principals to send you on those workshops. So thank you, absolutely. Zoe, last but not least.
I would say the best piece of advice would be to let them lead. Let your students lead you. Youth have an interesting way of letting you know what they need. And I think that a lot of times as educators, we put ourselves on this I am the teacher. I know everything. I know this is all the things in my toolbox that I got for you, and we're going to use that. And if it doesn't work, that's it. Right. And I think that, you know, we have to, every year is a new year, every quarter is a new quarter, every student is a new student. And I think that you have to be flexible and let them lead you. I remember my first year in the classroom, I'm like, all right, so these are all the fancy, shiny things I learned in school. And I felt prepared, but then I was like, yeah, I had to dismantle that and rebuild my idea and my ideology of what educating youth looked like. And so I came in with one angle, and I was still young and malleable enough to like say, okay, so this is what I thought we should do. This is what I thought we needed. Okay, so let me hear what you guys need, and just really open up that space. Let me tell you, in every position that I've had since graduating college, as a teacher, as a classroom teacher, as a counselor, now even as a program manager for a youth organization here in Baltimore, and now back to being an educator, they know that their opinion matters to me, and they know that I create a safe space for them to say, I don't really like how this is going. I don't really like how this is not really being helpful to me. And so when you create those spaces for them to say, this doesn't work for me, they'll tell you. And so I think it's just really important to allow your youth to lead you, to help them to success. Like, they're young, but they know what they like, and they know what they love, and they know what brings the passion and the fire out of them. And it's just up to us to be the people to be able to redirect when we're not going down the right path, and that teaches them valuable lessons. It's not about being perfect off rip. It's not about, you know what I'm saying, I have all the tools and we're gonna stick to that. It's about, this isn't working, what can we do now? We failing fast, but we keep learning. And so let them lead you.
Wonderful. I love that. Let them lead you. That was great. And then I was just reading through the chat. If you guys saw my eyes going all over the place while you guys were talking, just to make sure that we didn't have any questions. So there are a couple of questions that were in there. How do students define CRE was one, as well as what are the unique experiences, the unique values of CRE in Black and Brown schools. And then for the former teachers who now became teachers, why did you choose teaching, and what has made you stay? So anybody could go for it.
I'll go first. I'll start with the why I became a teacher. I honestly knew I wanted to be a teacher once I got to Morehouse. And it was really because of the teachers that I had at Banneker and 113. Thinking about Miss Cook Persons, Mr. Miller, Mr. Turner, Mr. Valentine, Miss Thomas, who was my science teacher, Miss Shiraki, you were my teacher at one point too. It's just so many teachers. Miss Jeffries, who was my math teacher, and like just thinking about all of these teachers, and they always like for me growing up, teachers were my role models. I always knew a good teacher, and I could not see myself like not going into the classroom or thinking about, you know, how I'm going to give back. I always wanted to give back, and I wanted to be a history. It's a funny thing. So I went to Morehouse for a history degree, but it didn't work out that way. I kind of got swayed into ELA. But I think knowing that I saw role models that looked like me, that, you know, related to me on these different levels, they talked about the same things that we watched on TV, and they ate the same foods that I ate. You know, I would see some teachers coming to school with their bacon, egg, and cheese in the morning too. And I'm like, okay. You know, I saw some teachers coming in, you know, that iced coffees in the morning. Mr. Turner would be, you know, walking to school with us and stuff, just having like normal morning conversations. What's going on? How was your weekend? And I thought that was normal for me, you know, and I was like, it's cool. I know, honestly, it was cool to be a teacher, you know, for me. So I was like, yo, I want to be like that, you know? And yeah, I get my kids, they'd be like, oh, you old, but I'd be like, that's all right. You know, trust me, wait till you get older. You're gonna know how cool we are. Because now I'm like, oh, yo, y'all was cool. Like it just came full circle for me. And it just really like stuck with me when I think about it. Like I always wanted to be a teacher. I just didn't know what kind of teacher at one point, which was history, but it didn't work that way. So I wound up being an ELA teacher.
Thank you. Bianca, I'm gonna ask you next because I know you said you have
So
Bianca.
like I said previously, I never wanted to be an educator. But what's funny is when I was in undergrad at City College, I was an English major, and a lot of my professors were like, why are you not a teacher? And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to write. I want to change the world. And I remember one professor who was published by the New York Times several times said, you can change the world as a teacher even better. And I was like, okay. Stuck with me for a few years. I still didn't pursue it. And then one day I just had like a midlife crisis at 22. Didn't know what I wanted to do. I have a bachelor's, can't do anything at all. I was working at Starbucks at the time, and I listened to an audiobook that said, think about those that you know and who they know, and then who they know. And I ended up having 2 interviews in the same school in one day. And then from then I was just a teacher's assistant. And I knew from then that this was made for me. And within 3 months, I got promoted 3 times and attended 2 different master's programs. And I've been there ever since. So it just happened so organically. I never saw it coming. You're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I'm trying to minimize the background noise, so I keep muting. Somebody else wanted to say something.
I did want to say something. The question
Zoe
was,
and then Sharian.
I think the question was about like the most important like element of CRE for Black and Brown students.
In Black and Brown schools, like, because
I
a
think,
lot of other schools have been doing CRE, but what makes it unique in a Black and Brown school?
I think affirming identity. I think you learn a lot about who you are when you're in an environment that fosters individuality and that fosters, you know, it's okay to be yourself. And that could be culturally, that could be like, you know, what you identify as, all those different things. I think in a Black and Brown school, like identity specifically, you know, I don't want to get all of, we already all know, just like as the diaspora, we have a lot of different versions of the same kind of identities. And I think that being in a place that celebrates that and you talk about it, I'm from this place, you're from this place. Like, how do we relate? How do we differ? How do we have like, you know, how do we bridge like cultural differences? And I think that in a space, especially in a city like New York, where there's a rainbow of what being a child of color is, like, you know, it's not just like you're Black, you're Latinx, like is a mixture of everything. I think really in a environment, that's what makes a difference. I think is just affirming identity and it's celebrating identity and those different things.
Yeah, and in a safe space, right, where you're not being challenged and pushed back. Thank you for sharing that. Sharian, and then Quincy, did you want to add something too? Okay, Sharian, I got you. Sharian and Quincy.
So just to piggyback off to what Zoe said, and I also wanted to add that representation matters. So just having educators around and administrators that look like you, that's relatable, that you know that the work that they do matter. Why? Because a lot of the educators that we were fortunate enough to have, they actually lived in a community. A lot of teachers from different places, they come to work and they go to Long Island, they live far. But the educators that we was fortunate enough to have, they lived in the community. So you knew that it was important for them to teach the students realness, because we are also a part of the community. In addition, I wanted to answer the question, what made you want to become an educator? For me personally, going to PS11, my 5th grade teacher, Miss Wednesday Webb, just seeing her be so relatable, and again with the content, I knew she knew what she was talking about, and she just inspired me to want to be an educator. I remember at the end of the school year, she would give me all of her old teacher curriculum books, and I would go home and pretend to and practice teaching. So it was at that time I knew that I wanted to be an educator. Just knowing how much a teacher can impact and inspire students is something that I really hold near and dear to my heart.
So I don't know if you knew, were you there when Ms. Webb became a teacher at 113? It was after you? She eventually started teaching at 113? It was after me.
I heard that she came to 113. I was so sad that I missed her, but Ms. Wednesday Webb, oh my goodness, yes. Love her.
Shout out to the teachers. And Quincy, yes.
I'll be short. I have too many memories when it comes to why you want to be a teacher, but I always say just the ability to instill power into another child. I wasn't that confident growing up, and then going into 113 and Banneker, so much belief and so much trust from them. I remember just one Miss Abdul Karim. I call her my educational mom. She knows that very well, and she just always ask me, "How you doing? How you doing in the morning? I got you. And it wasn't until I got my acceptance letter to go to college. The basic urban child, how am I going to pay for this? And she said, you got it. You're going to do it. And it's funny. She went into her own checkbook and said, I got you. This is going to go towards your books. And I was like, oh, I can't turn back now. And then even in that sense, even when I attended, she would come visit me in school. Like she would, hey, I'm down here in Atlanta. How you doing? Did you eat? Do you have this? How's your grades? So that accountability, and just to have that support system from your former teachers and educators was very strong. And she made sure, like, oh, you got to go talk to Mr. Kirkland, make sure he knows where you're going. You got to let the whole community know. Dr. Rock, he was like, hey man, be strong and you better finish. He didn't say good luck. He said you better finish. And that accountability was like, oh wow, like they are counting on me. The community is counting on me. So that part of how they made me feel and my confidence going into it, finishing and going to another degree, finishing it and feeling like, oh, I'm that guy. You know, just having that confidence is what I want to give to young other Black boys and girls growing up in Brooklyn, New York, or in Atlanta, Georgia, wherever, to say like, you can do this no matter what your challenges or what your oppositions are, what your odds are. And because just the simple words and the simple gestures from the people that educated me gave me the confidence to go out there to be great.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Oh man, that was so empowering and inspiring hearing all of you. Jaleesa, did you wanna?
Yeah, I'm kind of just gonna piggyback because it just seems like everyone is like saying, not saying, but is within the same realm. Just to say, piggyback on what Quincy just stated. Something that Banneker did, which inspired me to be a teacher, and my why is exactly what everyone stated. And to sum it up, it's just I feel like every teacher touched my spirit and my soul deep down, mentally, physically, emotionally, just touch my spirit to be who I am today. And like Quincy said, it's like it's no turning back. You had to do well. In the same way that these teachers touched my spirit, because I was a completely different person before I came to Banneker. I was not confident in myself. I suffered a little bit from depression. It was a lot of childhood trauma. It was a lot of different things that happened. But then having teachers like Mr. Turner, Mr. Muhammad, Ms. Coleman, counselors like Miss Mary Tuggle, Miss Woods, you know, think about all these different people, Miss Dr. Rock, you know, the fact that I had a principal who greeted me when they see me, it's like, you know, it's a lot of people don't get that. Teachers that genuinely care and touch your spirit as a whole, not just academically, but building your character. The fact that I received that and I know such a turning point it did for me, I wanted to be a teacher because at first I did not want to be at all. Even when something came to me in college, like, oh, you should be, no, that's too much work, da, da, da. And I was like, okay, maybe because, you know, I really was a hard worker after I left Banneker. So it's just like, okay, maybe I can give it a shot. But then sitting back and reflecting is the fact that I wanted to be a teacher because just like they touched my spirit, I know that I wanted to have that impact and influence the world like that. I was doing something before I was teaching. It just was not fulfilling me as a whole to be able to fulfilling me as a whole. So teaching, I know that I'll be able to touch on my spirit and make an impact like all those teachers did for me.
Thank you, thank you. And I also want to interject and introduce formally Majida Abdul Kareem, who is one of the teachers that most students have mentioned, who was a social studies teacher when I first met her 113, and then she went on to be an administrator at Banneker. She went on to be the principal, I believe, right? Yeah, the principal. So that's who a lot of students are referring to, as well as Dr. Kirkland, Dr. Khalid Kirkland, who's also from the community. He and Majida actually went to high school together. Funny story. Ended up teaching at the same school, and Kirkland was my math supervisor when I first started teaching there. And then he went on to be principal of other schools, who's now the headmaster at Boys Prep, all boys school in the Bronx. So that's pretty dope. So just, you know, the connections and the layers and the networks of folks who came through the community, gave back to the community, and then continues to inspire young people to do the same. I think that's powerful, and that's where our roots are, and we have to continue, you know, to pay it forward. So, was there anyone else who wanted to say something?
I wanted to say something in regards to we've all made a lot of great points in regarding to what we need to do for the kids. But I want to remind us that we also, as Dr. Rock said, it's about the people in the front of the room. We also have to take the time out to develop good, meaningful relationships with those people in the front of the room. They need to know that you appreciate the fact we know that they're supposed to come to work, but we have to let them know that we appreciate the effort, those things that they did. We have to make sure that we develop the relationship so that their ears will hear what we're trying to say, and that they don't take what we're taking when we have to have conversations with them, either in writing or on one-on-one. that we're not coming to them from a punitive aspect, but more of a corrective aspect, because we want to help them develop their skills so that they can be a better teacher. What I used to say, there's a C in you, but I know there's an A in there. I know there's an A in there. So you have to encourage your teachers, just like the same thing you're saying that you have to do for the students. You need to do that for the adults in the building as well. You've got to know that you care and welcome them back if they've been out sick. You have to let them know that you were concerned about them when they've gone through certain hardships. I know it's hard to do both, but that's why they call you the principal. That's why they call you the lead administrator. You cannot leave out the other adults in the school. So yes, you must develop strong relationships with them as well, letting them know that you are concerned about their personal growth and development as well.
Mhm. Could I just say one thing, Jessica?
Yes, yes.
Because I know we're getting ready to wrap up soon. I would just want to let you know how proud I am of these young people that are on this panel. I don't know how you feel, Ms. Corbett, but I'm almost getting weepy seeing these young people and what they're able to what they have accomplished already, and what they will be doing in the future. I hope that you will think about leadership. It sounds like most of you are still teaching, but think about this. You know, even though a lot of people say, "Oh, no, I don't want to get out the classroom. I love teaching," and that's true. But if you really want to make an impact, it probably could better do it as a teacher. So please think about that as you're going along. Get your credentials or whatever you need so that you can be leaders, because you are all fantastic. Just by listening to this panel, you have what it takes. All you need is to do that next effort and to run schools. And that's where you could really make a major difference. So just think about that. Just one last thing I want to add. I saw one of our parents, Pamela Tate, just sent out a chat. And the relationship with the parents are crucial as well, as you were talking, Ms. Corbett. We work for those parents. That's really what it is. And to have them feel comfortable coming into the school building. A lot of schools don't want parents to come in, but develop that relationship with them. And like she's saying, and then you become a family. Just imagine everybody working together, the parents, the teachers, the staff. Keep that in mind, that the parents are crucial if you're going to develop a good school. But everybody, you've made me feel so proud. And please do not stop. You are doing what our young people need, and you're going to make a difference. But you can't stop and start getting lazy and getting satisfied. I could stop, and Ms. Corbett could stop, because I'm ready to go to Barbados and stay there for the next couple of years. But you guys, please go out there and do what's right for the young people, because you have what it takes. Thanks, Jessica.
Oh, there I go again. Thank you. Thank you all. This has been an honor. I don't know if I even introduced myself today. I was so hyped to get into this discussion. My name is Jessica Uraka. I am a member of Adelaide Sanford Institute, co-chair of the Educator Programs Committee, formerly known as the Professional Development Committee. So what we do is support those educators who are supporting our young people to have that direct impact, and to continue to build strong networks. So I just want to run down some of the important points that were made about being courageous. In order to be, and Majida wrote in the chat, be courageous, not outrageous. I think that speaks to what Rock was saying in terms of taking chances, but you got to get results to be able to back it up. You got to know what the benefits are, as Dr. Corbett says, and keep it sustainable. Some of the young people said, put your egos aside, embracing errors, okay to fail. Quincy and Joseph talked about that. Dr. Corbett also said, in the chat was live about this, schools are more than an organization, it's an organism. Okay, can I get an amen? That right there is really where it's at. This is not, we're not making widgets. You know, this is transformational. This is a transformational experience. And no, every teacher that's in front of students isn't necessarily about it, but they have to become about it. And we have to, as their peers, the peers of those educators, we have to hold them accountable too, right? So not only are we holding our students accountable, we have to hold each other accountable if we're serving this young population that looks like us. Knowing our content, being culturally affirming is important. Yeah, and I think, drop another question in the chat if you guys have another comment, but it's 8:00. I want to honor everyone's time. Thank you all for sharing this experience, and we look forward to having more events like this. Please include, there will be surveys coming up. Please complete those surveys. We want to hear from you guys, because we want to give you what you need. We're talking to the attendees as well as the panelists, because you guys are educators and we're here to also support you as well. And I feel like this could be the seed to something greater, right? So that we can continue to support each other and hold each other up. And that's what Adelaide Sanford Institute strives to do. So thank you all. And I want you all to have a great evening. Enjoy the rest of this evening. Move forward with power, with presence, and intention. Have a great night, guys. I feel like I have to have some music playing out here.
Good night, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Everybody take care. Have a good summer.
Good night. Good night.
Yes. And please join us. And I also will say, please join us on Instagram, Adelaide Sanford Institute, to keep in the loop, and Facebook. Thank you, attendees and panelists.
All right. Have a good evening.